All right, so here we are in practice in Australia. And as I was expecting, we are going to get some rain during the race. To go over the
We're going to
race
be logging
here.
some extra data during this session. Nothing you need to worry about, but as we have some new parts on the car, we'll just confirm they're performing to spec.
I believe we had an aero and an engine upgrade come in. As we have rain for the start of the race. Let's go back through there. Yeah, start of the race, 86% chance of rain, as we did change our settings a bit. So where it's not so expected to be prepared for the race, but the sun will be, looks like the sun will be out. So we're gonna take a risk with our dry setup for the start of the race and go from there. So yeah, and from watching back, I looked back at the first two videos of how I wanted to do this intro stuff. We're basically gonna do the intro at practice, and then as we transition over to qualifying, now we're going to recap the tire compounds for the weekend. So we'll do hard compound first practice, medium compound second practice, and soft compound in third practice, and show the projected times at the beginning of qualifying to see where we will stand pretty much. As once again, I did adjust the difficulty for this race, and so far the difficulty is mid to high 70s for so far this season, and we're looking pretty good so far. We're pretty confident with those adjustments, as our teammate Mick Schumacher unlucky last race with the engine failure, and like I said, we're hopefully not gonna be experiencing that, but we'll have to wait and see. So we're gonna go ahead and knock out practice, and we'll see you guys for qualifying. Alright, so here we are in Australia for qualifying, and a little update, I didn't get Q2 for our timing table, but we did get a 121 on those mediums, so about a second, less than a second between all three tire sets as we move on to Q1. And provisional P10, and this is our first run, coming around these last few corners. A little bit better than I expected. This weather is could be better, as we come across the line. And like I said, the 120.6, I believe that was a 120.3 on the provisional softs from practice, coming to our final run of Q1, P12 provisional, ahead of our teammate Mick Schumacher in P13. We could have came around the corner a little bit better. We probably could have found about 8 tenths or so. But we did come across the line a little bit over a 120 flat. So that's good enough for P8 through Q1. Moving on to Q2. As we're looking forward to the rain coming through Q2 here again, sitting on P10 for provisional when we haven't ran first. About 11 minutes to go here, and coming around the apex of the corner a lot better than we did in Q1. So we feeling pretty good about this time, as we are still around that provisional time of a 120.3 here in Q2. Provisional P10 still behind Leclerc, Schumacher back in P12. Only able to find just over 4 tenths. We tried to get up to 0.5. Couldn't quite find it. Good enough for Q3 for P7. So we only gained 1 position off of our provisional time. So feeling pretty good coming into Q3. Original P6 off of our first run, and our entry into this chicane. Sorry. Could have been way better. So we have a lot more time to find. As you can see that we're coming across the line. 119.4, so we were really pushing it that lap, even though we had that mistake there at the end. Still provisional P8 here in the top 10. Gasly, our old rival, back in P10, because we did find a purple sector 1, and we just couldn't get it through. But yeah, so we're starting the race P8.
With qualifying complete, let's review our top 3 today. Norris, Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. With qualifying complete, all that remains now is the main event. We'll be live and uninterrupted for the Grand Prix tomorrow, so make sure you join us then.
Alright, so there we have a pretty close qualifying as we make it into Q3. Again, our teammate of Mick Schumacher making it into Q2 there in P12. As, yeah, so running P8 and just under a second behind the leader, Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri set a good time there in Q2, but yeah, trying to push these softs as hard as we could, and that little slip up there at the end on that hairpin or that chicane, and yeah, a little bit too much power coming out of the corner, and you saw that spin there coming out of the main straight. But hopefully the rain coming onto the start of the race won't be too much of a hazard for us. That way we can stay in the fight for points. So let's move on to the race.
Welcome to Melbourne, and welcome to the Australian sun. We're still getting used to some track revisions here, but the core hasn't changed. This is a beloved classic of the F1 calendar, and it's time for the Australian Grand Prix. We're a stone's throw from the enormous Port Phillip Bay for today's race at the 3.28-mile Albert Park circuit. It's a bumpy racing surface here, and the 14 corners can prove especially difficult in the wet conditions. So watch out for a safety car at some point during this Grand Prix. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. Lando Norris put in a fantastic lap yesterday, and he'll start from pole position, edging out Max Verstappen, who'll start from P2. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc, Russell, Perez, Johnson, Oscar Piastri, Gasly, Bottas, Mick Schumacher, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Ocon, Sargent, Jackson, Joe, and Callie Mayer. Now it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track.
All right, so we got a shot of the silver Mercedes safety car that we installed. And we're not going to be able to see that the entirety of the season. So, as I expected, we get intermediate rain. I'm glad it's not heavy rain. It seemed to be heavy rain last season, or so we thought. But it was intermediate enough rain to have us run the slick tires for the rest of the race and pull out that, I believe it was a P2 finish, our highest finish so far in our career. And luckily, that was our third race. But yeah, the race strategy seems okay. We're going to be in the rain majority of the race, but the lighter load, we're going to be lifting off a lot more. So yeah, we'll go with that and get right to the race.
Here we go then, the formation lap is underway. These are wet conditions here today. Each driver will no doubt be mindful of the wet surface as they prepare to race around the track. As the cars make their way back to the starting grid to form up and get ready for lights out, let's hope the race ahead today is a thrilling one that will go down as a memorable Grand Prix in the history books.
All right, so we're coming through the end of our formation lap. You can see the Connor Sport of Callie Mayer there. Connor Sport still not doing so great as they're finally pulling up to the start. P8 for our start. Our 5 red lights are on. Now they're off. And we're off to a pretty good start for our first race in the rain. The Red Bull, Sergio Perez next to us. Off to a pretty okay start as well. See the Ferraris there as we try to push Sergio Perez. We got pushed on the inside. I believe that was George Russell as we were trying to find our line going 3 wide through turn 1 and turn 2. As we lose a little bit of ground, but not too much. And this first lap or so, as soon as we slot into single file, I was feeling a lot better, knowing that I had to brake early on these wet tires, and the habit that I am, kind of bad though, because you want to brake late as much as possible I know it's not good for every type of racer, but that's how he went. A little bit wide there behind the Ferrari. From his toe that we had here in the rain. And then this chicane here. Brake early, carry a lot of our speed through, and stayed as close as we could to the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. We try to make a move on the inside here on lap 1, and we do so. Back up into P5 now, or P5 for the first time today. As we're now behind Charles Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen, and Norris, our top 3, as we ran out the end of the first lap. You can see how much more difficult it is to come through this last chicane in the rain compared to the dry, having to go really slow as we come around the straight. And yeah, about half a second between myself and Leclerc, about 3/10 between myself and Sainz, so we're stuck behind the Ferrari. Lap 4 is when we're finally able to try to make a move on Leclerc, but it's not quite it. Thought about making a move on the inside, but I didn't want to risk any damage, especially in this rain. And at this point, I've been checking the weather. It seemed like the weather was going to be starting to die down within the next few laps. So we had to keep that in mind as the track would start to dry out. And the intermediates with the drier part of the track would feel a lot more grip. We move the Ferrari to the inside, making a move on the outside for Charles Leclerc on turn 1. And we do so. You see him in the mirror as we take up that position. Now, 7/10 back behind Lewis Hamilton on lap 5. You can see here in sector 1 how early we have to brake compared to what we saw in qualifying and practice. A little bit of oversteer that we had to correct there. That way we wouldn't spin out. The Ferrari still trying to stay as close as possible. Trying to go flat out. You see how much more difficult it is to try to stay behind Hamilton. But by the time we get to lap 8, we're already 3.3 seconds back behind Hamilton and another second ahead of Leclerc. You can see how much more the track has dried out, how much more overcast it is in the rain. And so you can see the intervals. We're trying to close in on Hamilton as best as possible here on lap 9. And a little bit of a oversteer moment there. We try to do what we can, getting to sector 2 now. And feeling pretty good. Our teammate, Schumacher, not so much as he's back in P13. We're coming around these corners a lot better than we were at the start of this race as we're nearing the halfway point. And at this point, with how the track is drying out, I set my crew to put on mediums if I ever do come into the pits. But as we're coming through sector 2, we get a plume of smoke. It's gonna be our first engine failure. And by the time of this editing, it was answering my own question here throughout the episode, it was a heat unit component issue. So I don't know what the AI was doing there as we're trying to get out of the track, but very unfortunate for us to end this race.
What a fantastic Grand Prix that was, and an excellent win for McLaren. Natalie Pinkham, how do you think they were able to set themselves apart today?
Well, confidence breeds confidence. Success breeds success. They are very much enjoying a purple patch right now.
As the winners make their way up to the podium, one can only imagine the celebrations that will take place at McLaren tonight. Congratulations to everyone on the team, securing the win and proving that they're a force to be reckoned with out on the track. Have a look then at the drivers' standings. Max Verstappen now leads the Drivers' Championship. So then, Natalie Pinkham, who would you rank as your driver of the day?
I think for driver of the day, I'd probably pick Lando Norris. He lived up to every inch of his reputation today, and I think he'll be going home, quite rightly, a bit proud of himself.
It's time to check out the constructors' standings. The lead at the top comes down after a strong weekend from the challenging pack. It's been an absolutely wild weekend of Formula One action, and I can't wait to see what's next.
All right, so a very unfortunate finish to our race with that engine failure. Our teammate Mick Schumacher unable to get into the top 10 for points, but our rival from last season, Pierre Gasly, finishing in P10. And yeah, we started falling away from the top 3, top 4, and so it's trying to stay in front of the Ferraris and just couldn't keep our grip. We were getting ready to come in for slick tires, and that's when I noticed the red engine pop up without a message. And then lo and behold, a few seconds later, they tell us that we have to retire the car. But we're gonna go ahead and look into it between episodes and see what happened with our car with the early retirement. Because I know we were having issues with the ICE, and then the gearbox was actually going out pretty good as well. But I'm having a feeling that it's that heat component that we were waiting for a part. So hopefully we get that part before the next race. And yeah, so unfortunate for our team, Mick Schumacher out of the points, and then myself having an early retirement on, I believe that was at lap 8 or lap 9. But yeah, so if we look at our standings, Max Verstappen tied for the lead with Lewis Hamilton, back to their fight that they were having back in 2021. Yeah, Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton. And I just now realized it. Lando Norris, a 3-way tie for the lead. And with the win, or the podium today, yeah, so a 3-way fight. And then George Russell isn't too far behind, but Mercedes ahead by 35 points ahead of Red Bull. McLaren 5 points behind, and we're still P5, as we're pretty early. So Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri still yet to score points. So with that, majority of our field has scored points so far. And it's very unfortunate for us. We dropped down to P6, I believe, for the driver standings. And we'll have to come back in the next episode to see if we can finish the race. So we'll see you guys in the next episode.